Hello, friends. Welcome. I'm here with my colleagues, Daniela and Kendra, 5 and 2 resource team. We call ourselves because we're here to resource you. And you are our trusted, faithful friends and practitioners from around the world. And so we're happy to be here together. And we're embarking on this kind of new journey that is sort of combining what we've done in the past, CCD Foundations, but moving towards CCD facilitation. We called it a mini course because it's going to be short. And the emphasis here is really going to be on collaboration and being relational. And so there's going to be a little bit less teaching, and really that's what this video is. You'll receive a couple different videos to watch on your own time, but the emphasis is going to be on our time together when we're going to meet and have discussion together. And the three of us are not on the ones on the ground that are doing the learning and the practice, and that's really you. And so there's going to be a gold mine of learning to happen when we begin to share stories and activities, challenges. And so that's really what we're looking forward to. And so we just really want to encourage you to dig into these concepts so that when we get together and discuss, we'll really be able to grow deeply together. So just a couple of things by way of introduction to the course. Um, we want this to be an inclusive space, and that's always the way that we are at 5 and 2 Network. I'm going to just stop sharing here and see our faces a little bit better. You're going to hear different perspectives. You'll hear different cultural perspectives, religious perspectives, and this is an open space. And so we value hearing each other's traditions, faith traditions, what have you. We all have faith convictions, different books of wisdom, and there's learning to be mined in all of those things. And we want to value where each other come from and learn from every experience that we've had together and extend grace to each other, extend hospitality to each other, and love to each other. And so, really, the focus here in CCD Foundations is about a changed mindset. When I started facilitating at the time what I called asset-based community-driven development, ABCD, you still sometimes hear that term. Now we call it CCD, community-centered development is just the term we use in 5 and 2. I started about 10 years ago and I was living in Southeast Asia. And I was really teaching a course that was very pragmatic, working with communities to discover what they had and then to mobilize those assets. The problem I began to encounter is that people were sort of seeing this ABCD process as a methodology, kind of like a series of how-tos. It's kind of like baking. If you throw in all the right ingredients and you follow the instructions, you're going to end up with a tasty cake or a pie. And I soon came to realize that the practice of ABCD was really powerless if leaders did not first harness these core values that CCD is built upon, and we just call them principles. And so we worked really hard at that time to ascertain from people working in the field that were doing ABCD, what are the sort of core realities that make sense of this, the CCD, the productivity of CCD and why it works. And unlike methodologies, principles don't change. Sometimes I share with you guys one of my favorite quotes: methods are many, principles are few. Methods always change, principles never do. And for all of us, we have many methodologies that we've used over the years. And for those of you that have done development work, you're familiar with doing program planning, maybe logical frameworks and different approaches to doing humanitarian aid or development. And they're all good. It's not a matter of good or bad, but methodologies do change. And so what we're talking about here is principles, rules that really govern the universe and why things work. And we don't want to just get them here in our heads, but we want to get them into our hearts. And that's why we're not reluctant to go back to these foundations over and over again, because it's so quick, so easy for us, and it happens so quickly that we lose that focus and we start looking at the half empty part of the glass, for example. And so we are the idea here is to focus on these 8 principles. But we want to do it in a way that is starting to move us towards action and what we call CCD process, which is the following course. And so we're going to talk about 3 things by looking at principles. The first one is just, well, what is it? What each of the principles, we'll quickly look at it and say, well, what is this principle? Essentialize its meaning and its relevance, and really try to understand why it's so important. But then the second thing is to understand, well, what does that look like in your context? Have you seen it in the communities that you work in, or maybe you haven't seen it? And that's sort of a red flag to say, oh, well, maybe this is part of the problem in our community, is that we're missing out on whatever this principle is, wholeness or momentum, for example. And then the third aspect is, well, how can we promote it? What's the point of application where we can begin to move into this? So I want to share a personal story, and some of you have heard it, but it was the real paradigm shift for me, as I, was understanding CCD. And it happened in Bukavu, Congo. And I remember it was the day that I really gave up on traditional top-down development and began to shift from the outside in to the inside out. It happened in 2012 in Bukavu. And at that time, we were working, I was working with a development agency. We had been there for about a week. And I had met with a community leader who was really the leader of these programs and projects that we were involved with. And at the end of our time, we spent a time debriefing. And I'll never forget what he said to me at that time. He said, "I'm really glad that you came." And it was very, quite nice and cordial. But at the same time, he said, "I think it would be better if you stopped coming." And, that really floored me. And I was, on one hand, so shocked, but on the other hand, I wasn't totally surprised, um, because I knew that somehow the work that we were doing um, wasn't getting to the heart of the matter. And so, of course, I asked him, why, why is it that you want us to leave? And he started to describe an unhealthy environment that we were creating in the community. He described a centrifugal force. So imagine the centrifugal force is people moving outward, going outward, looking for funds, creating project proposals instead of looking inward. And he described a community that had a capacity for change. He described a community that had assets, that had social capital, that had an ability to make change, but they weren't depending on each other. In fact, instead of cooperation, we were actually helping create a spirit of competition and distrust. And so, in his wisdom, he had begun to point me in a new direction towards development from the outside in, towards development from the inside out. And so I'm going to turn it over to Kendra. While I'm doing that, I'm trying to share screen, and I'll keep working on that, and I'll send it over to Kendra here.
Thanks, Jamie. Um, I love the way you talked about the asset-based community development approach, Jamie, and I'm just going to build upon that and kind of share 5 and 2's twist on it with a community-centered approach. So I'll back us up. The asset-based community development approach is it's beginning with what we have. It's beginning with what is strong instead of what is wrong, as Cormac Russell likes to say. The typical approach to development is needs-based, and this is just a shift of paradigm and a shift of thinking. Inviting community members to ask first, what do I have in my hands to contribute to community change? It invites community members to think, instead of thinking, I have nothing to contribute, or I need to look for resources outside of my community, it invites community members to think, what do I have in my hands? I have something to contribute to community change and transformation. We draw upon the asset-based community development approach at 5 and 2, but we take it one step further. We drill in and hone in a bit more, and we call it the community-centered development approach. So I'm going to break this down by just looking at the 3 words very quickly. Community, right? The word community comes from the Latin word communitas, which means shared in common. That can be our families, our communities, it's our physical community, our work community, our communities of common interest. We are drawn to communities. We're drawn to fellowship. We share our joys and our grief. We share ourselves with our community. And it's the canvas on which transformation happens. We are community centered, right? So center, we believe that change begins within. It begins from the inside out. That's where the most meaningful transformation happens. It's citizen led. So when a community wants to make change, it begins from within the community and ripples outward. And then finally, development. And that is the transformation process in a community. It's a movement toward flourishing. So we love this community-centered development approach, and it is the framework on which all of the work happens in the 5 and 2 network. Jamie made a mention of our principles. So this course, it's laying the foundation, and we're going to focus in on our 8 core principles. And we do believe methods are important and process and system is important, but first we talk about principles because it anchors all of the work. Like Jamie said, methods can change, right? You might have to adjust course midway through a project, right? You might have to change your sequence of methods, but of course your principles will always stay the same. They will anchor and guide all of our community development work. So this course specifically is about us learning about the principles, but letting it kind of sink into our whole being so that it informs our work. We want to know them, but more importantly, we want to own them. And we want them to bring shape to what we do in our communities. So I'm going to pass it over to Daniela to talk a little bit more about the community and community function.
Thanks, Kendra. Yeah, so Kendra talked about the principles, and it's basically like a mindset or a paradigm that we're sharing with you, a way to view your community, a lens. And the purpose of it is so that we can function healthfully and as a community and be a flourishing community. So I want you to imagine your community as a shovel. Now, the perfect shovel is built with strong materials, and we put it together in a particular way, but it isn't really productive unless it accomplishes the function for which it was supposed to be fulfilling, and that is to dig. So function is the purpose of something. What is it there to do? For example, the function of a shovel is to dig, or the function of veins is to carry blood back to your heart. But what about a community? What are the essential functions or purposes that communities are best to take on? John McKnight, you might have heard us talking about him a lot in the past. He's a thought leader of asset-based community development, and he compiled 7 key functions of communities. And these come from common features that he's recognized over various social movements across history. And it's about a mindset shift. It's bottom up. it's grassroots, it's hyper local, it's citizen led. And keeping in mind that the definition of community is to share things in common, this is what we're functioning, and this is what we're functioning to do or to share together. This is what we're digging. And so these are the 7 functions that he recognized. The first one is enabling health. This means, like, how long do we live and what is our health like? And that's actually determined by our behavior and our social relationships, our environment, and our income. Secondly, assuring security. Did you know that the 2 main factors of safety in communities are whether neighbors know each other by name and how often they are present and associate with one another in public spaces? Thirdly, the function of a community is partly to do with earth care, stewarding ecology, because we are meant to be citizens of this world and of this earth and stewards of it, and not just consumers of our natural wealth. Next, the function of communities is to shape local economies. Rather than being dependent on major mega systems of economy, what's most reliable is starting local with neighbors, and neighbors having an important role in supporting these economic functionings and economic activities to create and build economic security. The next function is contributing to local food production. All of us have seen inflation making our food crazy prices. I've noticed it, especially having 3 boys. And the economy creates obstacles for purchasing food. So it's really important that we as communities focus on local food production and local economic circulation of the trading of this food to create more dependable food security. Another function is in raising our children. This is rarely true that the village actually takes care of the community anymore. We actually pay systems to raise our kids, preschools, teachers, daycares, and we forget that we as a community can be part of the process, actually should be. It's a function of the community to be raising our children as a village. And then the last one is this idea of co-creating social care. We know that we can't just buy care. We can buy services, but we can't buy care. And so I love what John McKnight says, that the function of a community is to create care. And he says this: care is the freely given commitment from the heart of one to the heart of another. That can't be bought. So when community citizens actually come together around these shared functions, it's amazing what gets started. People become curious and engaged towards a better future for themselves. And then from there, they tap into what they have and what they hope to produce together as a community. I remember a while ago, Jamie and I and a couple of other of the resource team worked with a local community here in Canada called SUMS, and they work with people who are homeless. And I was really hit when someone in the group described their work in the community as only being able to burn out fires and never really getting to the root of their problems. They wanted their community to become healthier and functioning so that homelessness is diminished, but they just didn't know how. So when we look at that list of the functions that I just talked about, what a community should be doing, we realize that we're putting the efforts on the wrong end. The doctor is being seen as the one who produces health and well-being. The police are the ones who are supposed to be keeping us safe and assuring security. The teacher is educating and now seems to be raising our children. But the institutions, these people are overwhelmed and they're not equipped to take it all on alone. That wasn't actually supposed to be their purpose as a community. So imagine the inverse of this. What if services of institutions, the doctors, the police, the teachers, were only supplementary after all of the essential functions of the community had been activated by the community members first? What if we could take a huge load off of these institutions because communities were sharing the load together before problems happened? This is how communities could function in a truly healthy way, with communities being activated and transformed from the inside out.
Mhm.
Yeah, and we're just super excited to be bringing people from all around the world together here to be talking about these things and to be teasing out these ideas and all of the thoughts that we're going to be talking about in the weeks to come. And we're really looking forward to doing that and discussing this in our collaboration time this week. So we look forward to that time together. And we will be coming up with the next couple videos, which will be each of the principles. So positive and wholeness are up next on the dock. All right, see you guys later.
Thanks, everyone. See you soon.